Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquata Zoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about administration. This is another group that you might not think about when you are visiting a zoo or aquarium, and you may not even realize exists. I'm sure you know that somebody's leading an organization and that there's paperwork that needs to be done to run a business and things, but who are these people? What are they doing? I should say, before I get too far into this, that the administration group is going to look a little bit different based on the organization that you're looking at. So, large facilities versus small facilities, or nonprofits versus for profits. Like, the composition, the size, the scope of an organization is going to look different, and therefore the teams themselves are going to look a little different. So, just keep that in mind. These folks are ones that don't necessarily get super hands-on with animals. They don't necessarily get super hands-on with the guest experience. They are kind of in the background, making sure that all the things to run the business are in place. So that might mean getting the insurance to where it needs to be, running the books, and this type of activity. So a little bit more of your paperwork kind of stuff, your organization kind of things, that sort of stuff, not necessarily the hands-on nitty-gritty getting in there and dealing with frontline activity. This is the group that kind of makes it all happen from behind the scenes, but in a very different way than, say, your animal care staff would, or your educators might, or your facilities team would. So, all these teams come together to make this organization work, right? You can't have successful zoos and aquariums without aspects of all these teams. Now, the teams may look different. There may only be one facilities person. There may only be a handful of keepers, or there might be a massive team of specialists who do all of this work. Depending on the size of the organization, that's going to change the composition, but you at least have the roles being filled in some capacity to make sure that this business functions. I suppose it's probably easiest to start from the top. Who we got there? That is your president, your CEO, your manager, the director of the entire facility is typically one person. In a nonprofit, they also might be working with a board of directors, right? So somehow there's a general person who is a leader. So this person, what are they leading? They're leading the organization. They're technically the face of the organization, right? So they represent the organization to other businesses, to the community, and that sort of thing. Like, that is their job. They are the physical representation of this organization. And what you might not know is that typically this person is not actually running the day-to-day operations of the facility, right? They are actually more involved with securing funds and moving money around and talking to the community and groups that can help out the facility and that sort of thing. Because they are the face of the organization, they are kind of in charge of managing the relationships that the organization has to its community, to other businesses, to all of the things that the organization might reach out and touch. You know what I mean? Particularly for nonprofits, this person in this director role, this president, the CEO role, this singular top person, right? That person has a lot to do with bringing in money and securing donations and that kind of activity. It's not their sole job. There's often another person who is helping them out with that, but they are the face. They are going to try and inspire the donors to see their vision and where they're going, right? They're kind of steering this big ship to go a certain direction in a kind of time frame, right? We have 5-year plans, we have 10-year plans, we have 20-year plans. The president, CEO person is kind of charged with getting us there and steering the ship, keep everybody moving in the same direction. But like I said, this person is not getting too involved with the day-to-day operations. There's people for that. Typically, you've got a director or manager of operations, right? So this person is often in charge of the daily functions and the planning to make that director's hopes and dreams happen, right? So the major director over the whole place is kind of helping to come up with the ideas and choose the right direction and all that stuff. Director of operations is getting you there, right? They're charged with making this dream come true, like making it happen and somehow dealing with all the problems that might occur. Not alone, of course, but they're kind of manning the day-to-day operations to make sure that we're moving in that direction and we're doing it efficiently. We're planning exactly how to get there. They're kind of drawing the map to get to the vision that the director has given them. You've also typically got a leader for the animal care side, right? It depends on the situation and the organization on where exactly that person's going to be, but you're going to have a centralized person who's in charge of animal care. Now, there are some facilities where that operations person and that animal manager is the same person. If it's small enough or the collection of animals is, I guess, simple enough, they may not need to be a different person, right? That might be the same person with two different roles to make sure that the front of house guest experience type operations are working correctly in one way, and then also managing the animal care, upper level animal care. They're typically not hands-on, dealing with the animals themselves, but they're just kind of making sure that the hurdles are removed, that everybody understands what the goals are and where we're headed, when projects are happening, how they're happening. These two roles, the front of house, back of house kind of thing, may be the same person. And it may be two separate teams, depending on the size, the scope, the complexity of the work of the organization. There's lots of layers that could be added in here if it's a particularly large or complicated organization. Okay, so we've talked about, I guess, essentially 3 different roles, even if they might only be covered by 1 or 2 people, right? So you've got your director, your animal manager of whatever sort, and then the operations manager of some sort, right? And so these are not the only people who count as admin, right? Administration. And so they need a lot of help because it takes a lot to run a zoo or aquarium, especially if you're looking at a facility that has multiple buildings, a very large staff, a very complex collection of animals, and the more that they do as far as the scope of their work, because you have facilities that are really good with scientific advancement and research, right? And they have others that are like elbow deep in conservation, like there's a lot of different types of facilities who have a lot of different goals in their mission and in their operations, right? And so you need more than these 3 to run a successful organization. And so who else is there? You've got accountants that are moving money around and keeping track of everything that's happening. You've got marketers and social media people that then are making sure that everyone knows that you're there and that you're having fun events and that everybody is aware of all of the programs that you offer and events that you have coming up, right? The whole point for especially a nonprofit organization is that you got to keep those donations rolling in, right? And memberships do that, and the ability to sell people on events and having people come in, whether they're local or from out of town, all of that stuff is very complicated. And forgive me, I do not have a marketing degree or a whole lot of experience in social media, but it takes a lot of thought and preparation to be able to produce the kind of content needed to reach people that you need to reach, to make sure that they are aware that you're there and that they want to come by, right? To convince them to come visit you. We also have the development team. This is kind of specific to the nonprofit groups, right? The nonprofit organizations. But you got to secure those donations, right? So there is usually a team, if not just one person. There's at least one person who's dedicated to locating and securing the money. Now, this is typically not that CEO president person, though that person may shift gears and turn into the new director, president, CEO person. But this is like a dedicated job to locating and finding those funds, securing those funds, and because that is a very time consuming kind of job. It takes a lot of schmoozing and a lot of chatting with people, making sure that people are comfortable, that they have a very good understanding of the organization and how the organization would use any kind of donation that somebody might give them, and to give them the options of what they might want to donate for. Sometimes we take donations for specific projects, a specific exhibit or a specific event. All this stuff takes a lot of organization, and it takes a lot of time and effort to keep everything organized because, this person over here may be kind of interested in donating but is not quite ready yet, right? And then you're cold calling somebody else who you've never talked to before, and they might be willing to give you a donation too. And like being able to sort through all these names and numbers and stuff and kind of keep people in contact so that they never forget that you're there and that you're interested in showing them ways that they can contribute to the organization, or donate to their favorite animal or something like that, or just be a bigger part of the community. That is a very big job, and it takes a lot of effort. And the people who are very good at it are extremely good at it. So that's where you have your manager or director of philanthropy or, giving. An organization may also have someone in the admin team who specializes in sales of tickets and memberships. So many of these organizations have like an annual membership kind of thing, right? Where if you're planning on coming a lot and you don't want to have to pay the ticket price to get in every single time, an annual pass may be a great option for you, right? And so there's somebody who's there who's in charge of making sure that the memberships are working properly, that the information about purchasing a membership is accurate and reflects, the benefits of having a membership and supporting the organization through a membership is all right. And then just making sure that those memberships are organized and that, all of those mailers go out on time and all of those, little fun invitations to special events and things are going out as they're supposed to. Sometimes that is a separate job. You're just dealing with memberships and ticketing and stuff like that. And so admin will often have a person or a role that is primarily dealing with that. Kind of hand in hand with that, you might have somebody who's in charge of events or schools and groups, right? It depends on your type of organization that we're talking about here. Sometimes there's dinners or overnight opportunities or all kinds of stuff. A zoo or aquarium may be a part of like a golf outing one day or something to raise money. All of that stuff kind of works together, right? And it takes a lot of money, time, and effort to organize large events. And so there may be somebody assigned that role to do events and to make sure that events go off without a hitch. I know I would not be very comfortable trying to plan a big event while trying to do my regular job as well. So typically that's a dedicated position. If you're running enough events or you have the need, you're probably going to bring in somebody who specializes in running events because they are the best at it. You'll get a good result every time, and it takes the load off everybody else because it's just a lot. You have to follow up with lots of vendors to make sure that the venue is going to be available at the right time and that you have all the supplies that you need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you've never run an event before, I mean, it's a lot of work. And if you have run an event before, then you know what I'm talking about. Schools and groups is more of it could be a seasonal thing, right? But that's typically also a separate person or a separate role, just because it can be a challenge. It may be a part of someone else's assigned tasks. It's typically busier in spring and fall rather than summer. That's just how it is. And so these are the folks that are kind of in charge of dealing with schools directly, dealing with teachers directly, and organizing field trips and programs and things that have to do with education and making sure that students coming in groups have a good experience and get the knowledge and experience out of it that they're hoping to, that fits into kind of the lesson plan of the instructors. So that's another kind of group that we have to deal with. Now, there's some complications with that because payment from schools works a little differently. You might be getting a check directly from a school to pay for, kids coming in on a field trip or what have you. And so that stuff is kind of hard to follow up on, right? It's not quick and easy. There's not usually a ton of credit cards involved. It's often just checks from a school district, right? So having somebody who's dedicated to schools and groups, it does help as far as making sure that the payments go a little bit more smoothly and to answer the many questions that teachers have, right? They're trying to fit this field trip into their lesson plan, and somebody who's dedicated to schools and groups and make sure that everything is kind of buttoned up and explained thoroughly is really helpful, so that the teachers' minds are at ease, the kids are learning what they're supposed to, and once they arrive on site, the schools and groups person can help make sure that that group is checked in easily, that there's less time, waiting and standing around and letting kids get kind of rambunctious and antsy, and more time getting them into the building and into the exhibits where they can see all kinds of cool stuff and be entertained and educated at the same time. Also, in the administration group, you may have a high-level educator, right? So somebody who's kind of overall in charge of the programming and how it's executed on the floor, the gallery floors, or who is in charge of outreach and that sort of thing. So if anybody takes animals out on the road and goes to schools or something like that, there's somebody in the administration who's kind of in charge of overseeing all of that kind of stuff to make sure that it's working well, that it's effective, that things are safe, right? And that the program is still effective over time, because, over time you may see that a program might be less relevant. And so they're just kind of on top of things and making sure that while they're not delivering the program themselves, they're making sure that the overall education aspect of the operations for the zoo or aquarium, whether it's on-site or off-site, is working well and that it's effective. In the administration group, you may sometimes find, and this is usually restricted to kind of larger organizations, but you may have someone who's in charge of research, conservation, scientific advancement, and that sort of thing, right? They may sometimes get their hands dirty, but oftentimes they're making sure that studies are designed properly, that they're being conducted properly, and that they are kind of writing up papers based on that and publishing based on the studies that they're conducting or the research they're doing within the organization. They're really more of the oversight for that science and research that's going on within their walls. Now, not all facilities are able to do this kind of work, but those that are probably have somebody high up who's kind of overall managing what's being published. If they're not writing it themselves, then they're honestly just watching over what's being published, keeping connections with other scientists who are interested in the same sort of material, keeping on top of the latest research and that sort of thing, and just making sure that the organization is represented in a professional manner for churning out good research and science. You may also have somebody in admin who is a specialist at grant writing. This definitely pertains more to nonprofits than for-profits, but somebody who is dedicated to finding, researching grant opportunities, and then applying, gathering all of the copious amounts of paperwork that will be required, and doing that grant work that is rather specialized. Somebody who's really good at grant writing and securing funds from, state, city, national, whatever kind of pots of money that might be floating around that they A, have to find, B, have to apply for, C, have to win. Somebody who is good at that is really, really valuable. So if somebody can put a lot of time and effort into it, it's a really worthwhile position to have if you can. But again, not all of us are so lucky, but if you are, you've probably got a grant writer in your admin group who is diligently searching for opportunities to get the institution involved and to churn out some good science typically, or apply that money for certain groups in certain ways. They are just really good at finding those little opportunities to bring in extra funding that's kind of beyond what the development team does, right? It's not an individual making a donation. It's pots of money that are sitting out that, state governments or federal government or companies even have set aside to do science or to conserve in certain ways or to put towards certain animal well-being and that kind of thing. They're kind of tasked with rooting out those opportunities and then applying for them on behalf of the institution. And it can be very cumbersome and difficult, very time consuming, because sometimes these grant applications are extremely long and detailed. And while it can be tedious, it can also very much be worth the money, or the time rather, to get that money for the benefit of the institution that is supposed to be used in very certain ways. So they're also kind of helping to manage where that funding is going so that they are meeting the requirements of the grant that they have won, if that makes sense. So not only are they getting that money, they're making sure that it's being used properly. Another one that a lot of folks often forget about because we center so much on the animals is human resources. This is a business that operates with people, and therefore there is a need for human resources. So that, pertains to all of the things that normal human resources folks deal with. And just because this is an HR spot at a zoo or aquarium, it does not change the actual workload of the person who's working in HR, right? They have to do the exact same things that they would do at any other business. Make sure that we're meeting all of our tax requirements, making sure that everybody's paperwork is filed correctly to be able to be employed there, that we're doing correct hirings, firings, all of that other HR kind of stuff that happens in any other type of business also happens in the zoos and aquariums of the US. Now, this HR role, it might be a team, but it might be just a person, but that it's typically separate from everything else, right? Because there's a lot of certifications and training that has to go into operating for HR as opposed to other roles that I've been describing here. So to make sure that everything is correct and that the HR person is also operating correctly to meet standards and guidelines that are set for HR, they are typically a separate entity, a separate person, because there's just a lot of work there to be done. And depending on how large that organization is, you might have more than one, but they are typically dedicated HR people. They don't usually have other roles. And I will say that that doesn't necessarily mean that they're on site either. Back in my day, they used to be. But, now today in the world of remote work, they may not actually be physically on site, but they will be there at any point in case the organization needs them. And so just be aware that you do have an HR person somewhere in there. Working with the HR folks, you might also have a learning development person or learning and development team, and they're kind of tasked with making sure that all of the trainings are occurring that the employees need to know, right? They're trying to make sure that everybody understands safety, that everybody understands management skill, that they're well trained for communication and that sort of stuff. So it's like professional development, but like internal. And really it's just kind of how to work together is the very simplified version of what they do. And this may be part of the HR person's job, or this may be just like straight up a learning and development professional. And so a lot of larger institutions have this person who is just charged with making sure that everybody has all the tools that they need to be able to do their jobs and work together. Typically that learning and development is part of the HR role. So that's kind of the only one that could be partially the HR person, but it could be also just another person whose dedicated job is learning and development. Another role that you may see that is involved with admin is a lead for security and safety. So this may not be a person who is typically like leading a security team or on the floor making sure everybody's safe all the time. This may be just somebody who's kind of in charge of making sure that it all happens, right? So you've got safety issues that could occur because we're dealing with wild animals, you're dealing with guests, and you're dealing with staff who have dangerous jobs. It's kind of a cocktail for a mess if it's not managed properly. So that's why we typically have somebody who's in charge of safety and security who is often in the admin group, just making sure that we are compliant in all of the ways, whether we're talking about national and federal level rules or state law or, AZA standards, all that kind of stuff. So there's typically somebody who's in charge of that, and they are also considered in the admin group. This whole administration group is a diverse group with many talents, and they're often not in the same space where you would see the people who are on the front line. So often you'll see that this group has its own set of offices elsewhere, maybe in another building, maybe on another campus, maybe in the building, but like on different floors. There's a lot of places where this group can live, but they are typically not in the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day operations of a zoo or aquarium. A, it's noisy. B, it's smelly. We love it for that, but they're also trying to have business meetings with people who may potentially be donors, right? So you'll see them around. They're typically wearing like office attire, suits, ties, maybe, or, nice clothing compared to a lot of the other folks who are kind of frontline people who are more wearing like a uniform. And so if you see these folks walking through a zoo or aquarium, you can probably guess that these might be the admin folks, right? So your CEO, your president is probably going to be looking a little bit fancier than your average keeper, and that's totally fine. Their job is totally different. They're the face of the organization, right? So they usually look a little nicer and don't quite smell like animal feces, right? But what I'm trying to say is that this is a very diverse group, and depending on the type of institution that you're talking about, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, whether it's a large facility or a small facility, this group is going to look a little bit different. There may be some shared roles if it's a smaller institution. There may be whole teams dedicated to these roles if it's a large institution. But the bare bones version is kind of what I've described here. You've typically got somebody who's in charge of the daily operations, in charge of animal care, in charge of facilities, in charge of security and safety, marketing, sales, development, HR, finance, schools and groups, events, like all of these folks are kind of in this group that is more office worker than it is front-facing keeper, front-facing educator, admissions retail type people. They're in the background, making sure that the organization is moving forward properly through the right channels, according to law, according to standards. They're making sure that the organization is functioning correctly, and also that we have an end goal and we'll never get there, basically. We keep dreaming big, and not to say that the frontline staff do not have access to thinking of these big ideas. They absolutely do, but the steering and the guidance of the entire organization is coming from the top. It's coming from administration. So it's just good to keep in mind that there's a whole group that may go unnoticed up there. If they're on different floors, they might be upstairs, they might be in a different building or an adjacent office area, and you may never see them. But know that they're there. Know that they're working really hard in their way that looks a lot different than sweating it out outside to make sure that this organization is functioning correctly and that we're abiding by all the laws and rules, our insurance is in the right place, we have all the permitting we need, etc., etc. They're taking care of all of that paperwork that no one ever thinks about. It's their job to think about that, and they're the ones who make sure that the operation is going smoothly, that we're not going to run into anything unexpected, and that we're really meeting the mission and dreaming big, and we're going to continue getting better, So all of that steering, all of that adjustment is coming kind of from the top, and that's where you're going to find your admin folks. And also, if you're interested in working for a zoo or aquarium, but you don't want to deal with the guests, you don't want to deal with the animals, you don't want to deal with, building and facilities and all that kind of stuff, administration requires people of all kinds. So if you're more inclined to be in an office environment, go for it. We have offices too. If you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium things or leadership and management stuff, let me know. You can write it in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.